Grom, and welcome to our 172nd Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Many believe that the bitterness between our political parties has reached historic highs. Some, including our new president, are calling for a state of political unity. Today, our panel will examine political unity. Is it even possible, or is it even desirable? Today's panel begins with Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist. Joe Gaines, former faculty member of the University of Akron, and Patty Haskins, member of the Wadsworth City Council. President Biden stated his intention to be the unifying president. First of all, what does political unity mean? And if you were President Biden, how would you go about politically unifying the country?
Well, I'm not sure what the definition that they're using when it comes to political unity. Some of the tone that's coming out of the White House and some of the spokespeople for President Biden have, I guess, a different version of unity. I would view unity as two people that have differing opinions coming together in some sort of a compromise that works for both of them. And I think when you can be on the opposite side and still have unity. We have a two-party system. It's worked for many, many years. And at certain times in our history, it worked very well. The two sides got along. It was, there's always been an opposition party. If the Democrats held, the power, the Republicans were the opposition, and vice versa. So we've lived with that. And I think what we've lost sight of is that with the social media that's out there and the media that's out there, they've driven a wedge between sort of the two parties, the moderates of the two parties that would be like to come together and work together for the good of the country. I sort of view what's happening now is President Biden has to feed his base some red meat. So we've got all these executive orders. He had to do something for his environmentalist base. So he canceled the permit for the pipeline, for the XL pipeline. I believe that's going to be litigated. I can't imagine the people behind, the XL pipeline are just going to lay down and not do anything. The folks up there in Canada had ramped up, and they're not too happy with it. People are losing their jobs. He had to throw a bone to his base, the transgender base, with the executive order that showed that young men can compete against young women. That's going to be litigated. I can't imagine that's not going to be litigated. You can't ignore, for the party of science, I don't think you can ignore biology. And any situation, they came out with a study, even the transgender men still, even after a series of, shots and all that kind of stuff, they still are so much faster, so much stronger than the biological girls. I can't see that standing. I just can't see biological men who identify as women competing in powerlifting and sports. I read a little interesting thing about the women's soccer team. The U.S. women's soccer team that won the championship. They played a high school championship team. I think it was the California boys Division II team. And the Division II team the boys, they ran away with the game. I mean, there is a difference between biological men and biological women, but he's got to throw a bone to that part of his base. So a lot of the things that I see happening now, I believe will be, stymied in the courts. And he has to feed, that very, left-wing base of his so that he can move on. The impeachment thing is a non-starter. And I think Patty and I had mentioned this in the last time, we would have advised him to call up Nancy and call up Chuck and say, listen, stop this. We now know that there are 45 senators in the Senate that are Republican senators that will not go along with this. What's come out of it also, this notion that they were going to do away with the filibuster. There are 2 Democratic senators. I'm not quite sure who those 2 were. I didn't get a chance to look them up. Probably one of them is Joe Manchin from West Virginia. So that whole notion that the filibuster is going to be done away with is dead. And I think, President Biden has been around Washington for 47 years. He knows that when he throws those things out there, that the opposition is going to swat it down. So he can step back and say, I tried. I really tried, but it's those daggone Republicans. And vice versa, Republicans have done the same thing. We really tried to do this, but it's those daggone Democrats. We couldn't get it done. So unity to me means coming together in the middle with some compromise and moving forward with the pressing needs of the country.
Would you throw the word civility in there?
Yeah, I think you can be civil. We really have to get back to using language that invites discussion. I don't think it's helpful when people use words that deal with cleansing, paybacks,
reprogramming,
deprogramming. And these are terms that are being used by people that are on CNN. I mean, these aren't the crazy loons on social media that are talking about it. These are people that are saying that, there has to be a purge. We got to get rid of these people. What happened? They have all been brainwashed and all that kind of stuff. I just think that doesn't help, the call for unity when the other side, the losing side of an election, is painted as extremists, Nazis, Hitler lovers, fascists, and that doesn't bode well.
Yeah. Ron, what do you think? Ron, are you there?
Got to unmute myself. Bryan, you're as cynical as I am. Yeah, I think unity is taken to mean my way or the highway. And Bryan, you stated very well. It really needs to have cooperation. Now, what makes me excited about the Biden agenda is that many of these things, in my opinion, need to be done. The climate change initiatives, the pipeline, and immigration things, and so on. But already, there's pushback. Now, should there be unity? Yeah. Should there be opposition? Yes. I think we need to have each issue be fairly considered and debated on both sides of it and try to come together to the common ground. And that just hasn't been happening. And just as last week, I'm in the short term, I don't look for this to be very easy to do. I recall back on, it was probably in the 60s, there was a book by a sociologist called, as I recall, Robert Ardrey. It was called The Naked Ape. And his philosophy or his premise was that a lot of people's behaviors really can be likened to those of many animals, particularly in the territorial aspect. And we have in the political parties a strong territorial aspect, state out, this is my position and this is where I am and this is where my tribe and my group stands, and we're not going to budge for that because this is our spot. And that makes it very difficult. It's part of human nature, and hopefully we have enough brain power to transcend that human nature, and enough emotional stability, and enough morality in many cases to try to get by that. And I don't look on it politically as something that's going to happen very soon. Already we've seen there's immediate pushback on Biden's initiatives. And Bryan, there's probably some truth in the fact that this is, quote, throwing a bone to, unquote, to the base. On the other hand, in my opinion, of course, from my perspective, many of these things need to be done. And I hope that in some form or other, they do get to be done. I had a discussion yesterday on Facebook with somebody about the phasing out of fossil fuels in terms of global warming. And it was, so far, civil. The person hasn't gotten back to my latest comments, but so far it's a civil discussion. And civility needs to happen. It needs to be there. And short term, I'm not very optimistic. Long term, I'm still a little hopeful. So.
Okay. Joe, what's your take? Press the right buttons, Joe.
Unmute.
Yeah.
Patty, why don't you go ahead with your comments, and Joe will join us later.
Okay. I agree a lot with what Bryan said and what Ron said. The idea of unity has, I think, been misinterpreted. That it's not going to mean that everybody's going to come together in this kumbaya moment and everyone's going to agree on the same thing. It's not going to be that everyone's going to agree with the Democratic stand, nor is everyone going to agree with the Republican stand. I think it's in what is in Great Britain, you have the other party known as the loyal opposition, whereby it's their duty to make sure that you discuss all aspects of an issue so that you come up with the best situation or compromise or consensus for everyone. I know there's so many issues that so many of us feel that, why doesn't everybody agree with me? Why doesn't everyone agree that we should all wear masks? Why doesn't everyone agree that lowering taxes is great? Why doesn't everyone agree that we should all get a vaccine? And these seem so obvious to us on our side, but we still need to listen to the other side. John, you had used the word civility, and I agree. I think that's what we need. We need to have civil, rational discussion on issues. We've done this program for a number of years now, and I've heard both sides of all issues. And I can't tell you how many times where listening to the other side, yes, even you, Bryan, has made me stop and, pause about an issue and think, well, maybe, I need to consider this as well. And that's what we need to get back to have this civil discussion on issues. Now, is that always going to happen? No, because unfortunately, we still have too many extremists that are actually part of our legislation. And these people have come up with some ridiculous ideas. And I mean this on both sides. We just recently in Georgia elected I shouldn't say we, because it was not us in Georgia, elected a representative who's a member of QAnon and who supports all of those theories. And as far as I know, I am not.
I'm sorry, Patty, what was that? Member of what?
QAnon.
Oh.
And, and I'm not a lizard person, okay? And I know that Ron and I do not go out and drink the blood of children and eat them, which is what QAnon believes. And
it's just an idea.
It's an idea, but it's being purported by these people. And, the thing that they are supporting, bringing out, guns and shooting Nancy Pelosi and so forth. Now, you can go to the other side, and some terrible things have been said about Republicans. by members of the House. And we all know who they are. And that does not promote unity. That type of rhetoric is what needs to be stopped. And we need to get back to civil discourse, which is hopefully what we do on this panel. So.
And Joe,
Can you
are
hear me
you?
now?
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Well, what I want, and I'm trying not to interrupt Patty because I agree with her. And I also agree with something that Bryan said. That's the word tone. We've got to change our tone. You know, when we look at things, what's facts and what's not facts? A lot of politicians bring out what would they call facts, and we believe them, and they're not. And that gets people upset, gets people to be uncivil. And we need to be more, more civility towards each other. I truly believe that we can become more unified. We have to be more unified. And by that, I don't mean unified in the sense of like Democrat working with just Republicans and so on. I mean, working for the people. What do the people need? What do the people want? What do the people have to have? You are our people, our civilians. And we're not doing that. What we're doing instead is working towards trying to, in many cases, satisfy the needs of the Democratic Party or satisfy the needs of the Republican Party. And I think that's wrong. I know, you know where I'm going to go with this, I think. But I think it became really a problem with the last administration. The last administration, in many cases, I see Bryan laughing. I think the last administration, in many cases, redirected a lot of the ideas to become more disunified and to work against the people and to work for that political party that they represented.
What about some of the basic beliefs of political parties? I don't know if they should be up for grabs. The Democrats believe in big government and government control, government assistance, government aid. Obviously, they promoted many programs to provide assistance to the poor, affirmative action and so forth. And the Republicans, on the other hand, are looking for small government and free enterprise. Those are fundamental beliefs.
Is that too generalizing though?
Yeah, I am. I don't know how else to state fundamental principles of a party other than in general terms. Generally, Republicans adhere to the Constitution, believe in free enterprise, and believe in small government like the founders did. Democrats, on the other hand, have historically generated much larger government, much more involvement in the lives of people, particularly when it comes to minorities and the poor.
Do you think that we had to in some cases?
Had to what?
Get more involved, especially when it came to racism and other problems like that. I mean, for one thing, let me just go back to one thing. You know, George, if I'm not mistaken, George Washington even said that having political parties was not a good idea.
Yeah, I believe he's probably right, but I don't know if we had one single faction controlling everything.
No, I agree with that too. But at the same point, what I'm trying to say is that in many cases, the Republican Party and Democratic Party can work together, has to work together. Why? For the people.
Have in the past.
Pardon me, Ron?
And have in the past.
Yes, 1964 is a great example. Republicans and Democrats came together with the Civil Rights Act of '64 and proved that it can work. But then, well, that's a different discussion.
Can I just add something here to
Sure.
maybe dovetail into what Joe was saying? I believe that the two parties created a Donald Trump because it takes that sort of environment to create a populist.
Mhm.
You can have a populist on the other side as well. So when you have that, then you have an environment, you have the ingredients to create, Donald Trump. The media, if we remember correctly, they supported, every time that guy called in to Joe Scarborough or any other, they gave him the airtime. They estimate they gave him over $1 billion of free advertising, So we have to get away from this notion that somehow we've got to tag the other side or, cleanse the other side and go through all these things. Yeah, I've just finished a book, been reading several, one on John Adams. And back in the day, when they had two people run for president, John Adams ran and Thomas Jefferson. They didn't like each other, really. If you read anything about Thomas Jefferson, came from a very different, very wealthy. John Adams sort of brought himself up by the bootstraps, so to speak. And when Thomas Jefferson lost the election, John Adams, he was the vice president. Thomas Jefferson was the vice president. They were opposed to a lot of things, and that's how it was. You had two people. Whoever won the presidency, the loser, if you will, the second winner, he became the vice president, and those two managed, to get along.
What's strange is that I'm reading a book on John Quincy Adams.
His son, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and
Very
that's
interesting, very intelligent man who, with all of his intelligence, was knocked, wasn't given a chance to really to do the things that he wanted to do to get done.
Yeah,
for political reasons.
And I think he was elected through the House, wasn't he? Wasn't there something?
Yeah, I
with the
think
election?
so.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So, this notion that we can't get along and the two parties can't get along, I think the extremists in both sides need to read a little history,
I agree.
and realize that we can put the people's work ahead and move on. We're in the middle of a pandemic.
John, you mentioned the basic beliefs of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. Do you not think that over the last 4 years, however, that the basic platform of the Republican Party has changed in some ways so as to become more of the party of Trump, which is why you're seeing so many Republicans pulling away? I know that, during the election, the Lincoln Project was a number of Republicans, very staunch, lifelong Republicans who pulled away and opposed Trump because they felt he was pulling away from the basic tenets of the Republican Party. How do you feel about that? Do you think that that's the case? Bryan, you might answer as well. So
when I look at the things that he promised during his campaign and the things that he delivered, lowering the tax rate, lowering the activity of the regulatory bureaus, controlling the southern border, these all were part of solid Republican beliefs, I thought. My problem was, I think that over the 4 years, there became a rather dangerous cult of personality. In fact, that's words of my son Adam, referenced the cult of personality. And I think that's always dangerous. But then again, I think that you have to blame the media for that. Bryan pointed out that during the campaign, and I remember the debates, so-called debates, they always put the person who was leading in the polls in the center. And Trump was always in the center because he was always on television. He was always being not played up or played down, but referred to by the media. So he was always in the center position. And I can't remember which one of the competitors pointed out, why do you ask each one of us, instead of a question about where we stand on something, you ask us how we feel about something Trump said. That was all a media problem, I think.
Good point.
But I think that there are some fundamental beliefs on both the left and the right. And, you know, and my question, is it really, does unity mean that we all think alike?
No,
No.
no, I don't think we're ever going to all think alike, and good for that. None of us are perfect. None of us know all of the answers, and we need to have difference of opinions to validate anything that we feel and to come up with the best possible solutions for the country.
Haven't we gotten to the point where the voters on each side have come to mistrust each other? I mean,
One of the things, I think we really need to move away from this notion that this problem started 4 years ago. And it's only been in the last 4 years. Because I've been observing things over the last 12, 16, 20 years. I was disappointed when the politics of personal destruction basically took off and the media ran with that. And, you know, I sort of lay that at the feet of James Carville. You know, this win at all costs, you know, whatever happens, it's, you know, it's a zero-sum game. And, you know, as long as you win, at the end of the day, it doesn't make any difference how dirty you get, how salacious the rumors you start about people. There was a dignity when Nixon ran against JFK. There was a dignity when Eisenhower ran, and these, you know, our politicians in the past. I don't believe there's any real dignity anymore on both sides when it comes to winning an election. And we've taken it so low that it just feeds the base. It just feeds these extremists. And when they don't get their way and they don't see compromise as a win-win, it's always someone has to lose. That's really one of the issues I have. You can have politics where Patty wins and I win. Patty doesn't always have to lose, and I don't always have to be banished as the loser. So I think we really have to move away from that. The language and the verbiage that people use, I don't think helps the situation at all. You know, I don't hate Patty. I don't hate, you know, Joe or Ron. They're welcome to their opinions. We can agree to disagree, you know, and I don't cross the street or I don't defriend people because they don't believe the way I believe in. And I just think we have to really get back to the center of things.
Bryan, that's a perfect comment to wrap up this program. Thank you very much, folks. See you in 2 weeks.